Good afternoon, everybody. This is Viveka from the Nourished Caveman and the Healing Foods Method. I hope you can see me and hear me today. Welcome. It's another live Thursday, and today we have quite an interesting and controversial topic, which is keto and cholesterol. And first of all, I just want to thank all of you who are here watching. Thank you for joining, and please, it's always really nice to hear where you're joining me from. Say hello and tell me where you're watching from. I'm here in Mount Shasta today. Hi, Renee. I saw a picture of your kitty on Facebook, Renee, the barn kitty. Oh my goodness, it's adorable. I am a little cat deprived. Anyways, getting a little sidetracked as usual, so forgive me for my rabbit brain. But for those of you who don't know me, I am a keto nutritionist and I specialize in endocrine rebalancing, so hormones, all kinds of hormones. Michigan, yeah, so I think Renee says our cholesterol is normally high. We have quite the topic today, and you know, it's a complex topic. There is a lot to talk about. There is a lot of information, and actually I have something that I wanted to read you from, which I left over there. I also have a bunch of notes because it's so much to cover, and when you're live, you just have to cram it all in the brain and hope for a smooth delivery. But let me grab the book because there is a quote that I want to read you. So I'm going to do that real quick. And as you guys come in, so we're gonna talk about cholesterol, and specifically within the context of a ketogenic diet. Now, let's jump straight into it. I have been doing keto for about 5 years now, and studying nutrition. I started practicing nutrition about 7 years ago. So my first knowledge of cholesterol as related to health comes from, of course, my studies of nutrition. And then as the ketogenic diet started becoming more and more popular, of course, there has been a lot of studies, a lot of research, and a lot of really brilliant young doctors that are now interested in the correlations between cholesterol and the ketogenic diet. There is a lot of great information out there that is very new, and a lot of research that is very new. What I want to tell you is that a lot of their conclusions are great, but they are really not that new, because in the world of nutrition, we have known what's the truth behind cholesterol, very different than what the medical establishment unfortunately is trying to sell you. So I would like to start with a quote. It comes from, this is one of my old textbooks, and I still use it all the time because it's about blood work, and I do read a lot of blood work, and a lot of times I have to reference here, this or that in my old textbook. There is a wealth of knowledge in this book, and here I'm in the section about cholesterol. So we'll start with this quote, and this is from medical student textbook. This is not from nutrition. What I'm reading you is the misinformation that doctors are given in their medical school. It says, low density lipoproteins or LDL cholesterol, and actually, you know what? Before we do this, here we go, all over the place. Before we do this, let's have some clarification, because I just realized that not everybody here is actually a nutritionist or a doctor or a nurse. I mean, not all of you are so familiar with the terms, the terminology related to cholesterol. And in the first place, what is cholesterol? There is a lot of misinformation out there. So I thought that we'll start the video by giving a little bit of clarifications. What do we mean by cholesterol? So when we look at your lipid panels, there are a couple of things, and we'll talk about blood work, we'll talk about markers, we'll talk about risk factors. Those are all things that we're going to talk about during this video because they're all related to the topic. And also we're going to talk about what should you be concerned with and what you should not be concerned with within your ketogenic diet in regards to your lipids. So what is cholesterol? Cholesterol is actually not exactly a fat. It is a kind of fat. It's a kind of lipid. It's called a sterol, and is actually a steroid alcohol. Cholesterol is, we call it the duct tape of the fat world. That's a very fancy nutritional term because one of the main functions of cholesterol is that it fixes things. It's sticky and it's waterproof, and it can go in as duct tape and fixes problems in like micro tears in your arteries or any problems in your body. The main functions of cholesterol are to, first, they're part of the membrane of the cell. So every cell has cholesterol. It's a foundational part of your physiology. The other big function is that your sex hormones and cortisol, your stress hormones, are made of cholesterol. So it is really important, and we'll connect it to your cholesterol levels, that great importance, in a second. A little interesting fact about cholesterol is only 25% of the cholesterol found in your body comes from the diet. 75% is actually made in the liver. So your liver will produce cholesterol in depends to your needs. It doesn't just arbitrarily like eat fat, make cholesterol. That is a myth. Whoever told you that didn't know what they were talking about, because cholesterol is just made in response to need, and is mainly made in the liver. So that's one thing. Second thing, triglycerides. What are triglycerides? Triglycerides are another kind of lipid, and they're little molecules that are made out of two free fatty acids and one glycerol. We call it the backbone, glycerol backbone of the molecule, to which the little fat particles attach. Triglycerides, just like any fat, they're not combining with water. They're called waterproof, water resistant. So they cannot just freely travel throughout your bloodstream. They don't just go into circulation by themselves. So doesn't cholesterol, because it's also waterproof, water phobic, it's called. Repels water, just like if you drop a drop of oil on the water, the oil will sit right on top and not mix with the water. So in order for these fatty acids, fatty lipids, to travel to your bloodstream and get delivered as food to, or as duct tape to the cells, we need a transporter. So the transporters are proteins, which are free to circulate, and we have two kinds of proteins. One are the infamous LDLs, the low density lipoproteins, and the other ones are the HDLs, also called the happy cholesterol. H like happy, it's a good way to remember it, but they're the high density lipoproteins. We also can remember them as LDL means leaves the liver. So they're the ones that carry the fats out of the liver and into circulation to the cells, while the HDL comes back to the liver. So they're the ones that bring the excess fatty acids back once they have been out in circulation, distributed, and not in use anymore. So they get recirculated and recycled. Your body is very effective. There is almost no waste in the body. Everything has its place, and the liver is usually the big hub, the very important hub where many functions are regulated. So now that we know, and so there, to make it very clear, there is a first big misinformation is that LDL and HDL are considered cholesterol. They are not. They are proteins. They are proteins that transport cholesterol and lipids on their back, kind of like piggyback. Sorry, ladies, there is messages coming in as usual. So they're transporter proteins. So when we call LDL the bad cholesterol, that is an incorrect way of using the term, because it is not cholesterol, it's a protein. So back to us. Speaking of the infamous bad guy LDL, so I was trying to read your quote before we got into these clarifications. And by the way, please, you feel free to ask clarifications or questions anytime. I know that we're starting with the not so fun stuff, but I want to get this out of the way to get to the juicier part, to like the correlations of cholesterol and keto and what your numbers mean, which is really the part that, you know, we all want to hear about. But a little bit of education about this topic, I feel like it's very important, because we all want to be able to talk to our practitioners. We all want to be able to talk to the doctor and have a serious conversation, not just have a doctor come into your doctor, run a lipid panel, and then your doctor will be like, oh, your cholesterol is high, here is a statin, go home. So no conversation, no communication. Without education, you are pretty much a helpless victim to the medical system. And the reason why I spend time and energy doing these videos is because I want you to be empowered. And this is from the nutritional perspective. Again, there is a lot of good information out there. Not all of it comes from the nutritional perspective. So let's go and read what the medical students learn about cholesterol. This book is about 5 years old, so this is pretty recent information. And this is what the students are taught. Low density lipoprotein, or LDL cholesterol, first of all, here is the first blunder, because it is a lipoprotein, not cholesterol, so it already is like negating itself. It's the bad cholesterol. The higher the level of LDL cholesterol, the greater your risk of a heart attack. When the level of LDL cholesterol goes up, excess cholesterol can build up and stick to the wall of your arteries. This causes damage. The buildup is called plaque, and the formation of plaque can cause arteries to harden and narrow. Now, this is just a big bunch of confusion. It's not true. And so let's get here for a minute into what does really happen. So we already discovered that LDL cholesterol is not a fat, it's just a carrier protein. So what LDL does is it starts out as a protein containing a number of things that will go in circulation, transported to be delivered to the cells. So actual cholesterol molecules are transported, and then triglycerides are transported. Now let's bust another myth on triglycerides. What are triglycerides? We saw there are molecules that are, made to transport these little fatty acids so that they can nourish the cells. But also they are storage molecules. So what happens when we eat a lot of calories? We have big meals all the time, and especially a lot of calories in the form of sugar. The liver cannot store sugar. It stores glycogen. Muscles can store glycogen up to a certain amount, but everybody who has fasted knows that after about 38 to 72 hours, all the glycogen is done. We have no more sugar in our body. We need to switch to ketosis in order to survive. That is because our body cannot store a lot of sugar. So when we eat a lot of sugar and we have all these excess calories, this excess energy, how are we going to store it? Well, we need to store it in a storage form, which is, guess, the big $1 million question, triglycerides. So triglycerides are made in order to store excess calories coming from sugar, not from fat. We can also store fat as triglycerides, but the likelihood of excess fat calories being stored as triglycerides is a lot less, because it gets stored in different ways. Fat gets stored as different lipids, not as triglycerides. And that is why actually triglycerides is one of the great markers that we look at when we want to have ideas about the health of your lipids in your body. So that means predictors of cardiovascular disease. And this whole conversation about cholesterol, we all think that is a CVD predictor, right? We all think that we look at cholesterol because we want to know about the health of our arteries. We want to know about the predictability of a cardiovascular event. In reality, in the lipid panels, one thing that we see is also with the triglyceride, a predictor of metabolic syndrome. And on the other hand, it is a signal that metabolic syndrome is present in the body. So we'll get into this in a second. I will explain it better. Let's see what happens. Let's talk about why is LDL called the bad cholesterol. What happens is that how does that famous plaque in the arteries that we just talking about giving LDL a bad name, and that it deposits LDL goes on the arteries as plaque. Let's have a better look and understand what's really happening in there. And by the way, I found this really awesome video, was from Low Carb Colorado 2019, and it explains, I forget the name of this doctor. I know there is Dave Feldman, he has great explanations, but this is a doctor from Australia, and he is just wonderful, and he explains it really well with great graphics. So I'm going to link that video under this video, so that if you guys really want to go into the physiology and the details, not just my quick breakdown, you can watch his video, which is about 45 minutes. So what happens to LDL? So when LDL leaves the liver, it's carrying triglyceride and cholesterol, and is like going on this little mission to the liver. Now, as it releases the cholesterol and triglycerides, the protein shrinks and it becomes a VLDL protein, very small lipoprotein, dense lipoprotein, I can't speak. And this small lipoprotein actually can become easily damaged. And we need to introduce another character to our story here, which is the ApoB100 protein. It's another protein. There are many characters in this novel. And this protein is wrapped pretty much around our little VLDLs. So this protein is kind of like a key that goes into the lock. That's why it sits outside the VLDLs, and it's what enables the VLDLs to be uptaken and, recognized by the receptor in the liver when they need to be recycled and reabsorbed, so they're not in circulation anymore. So now our VLDLs have gone into the bloodstreams, have delivered their cargo, and now they are on the way back to the liver to be recycled. But what happens is that when we have a lot of sugar, high blood sugar, a lot of sugar in circulation in the bloodstream, sugar acts kind of like the schoolyard bully, and it kind of goes in punks. Our poor VLDL proteins, you think about this, the little VLDLs, and here comes sugar, and really gives those little proteins a beating. And what happens is this process called glycation. Glycation is, it's a funny image, right? But I think that's a good image to keep in mind to understand what happens. And sugar here, for me, sugar is the villain of the story. I mean, it's pretty clear, right? And all of you who do keto, we know that sugar is the villain. But it's good to see why, because somebody can just tell you sugar is a bad guy, but we want to know why. What did it do? What is he actually really doing? Or is this just another myth that we need to eventually debunk? But no, when we look at the processes of the body, we really see that sugar is a punk and is punking the little proteins, and so is destroying or damaging the VLDLs through this process called glycation. And they can be damaged to the point that they receive oxidative damage. And so they become oxidated. forgive my English, it's always, let's see, oxidation damage. Yeah, I guess I said it the right way. So once the VLDLs are oxidated and damaged, now they become dangerous. Finally, they really become the villain. But why? It's kind of like, if you think about it, you know, the bully, big bully, goes to the small kid, he beats up the small kid day after day. Eventually, the small kid turns bad, you know, it just been so traumatized that it turns around and start beating up on other children. And the same thing goes with our proteins. Sugar beats up on the VLDLs, and now they become oxidated, they're damaged, and now they go into your bloodstream, into your arteries, and they start causing damage to the endothelial cells, to the point that they can create gaps between the cells. So the inside of your arteries becomes, it's kind of like it happens in leaky gut, same thing. There is only one thin layer, one cell layer that is just like the inside, the lining of your gut. Same for your arteries. And when this layer becomes damaged, it starts pulling apart. So there are gaps between the cells. In those gaps, the little bad VLDLs slip in and start accumulating. But then again, so our little daytime, what is it, day soap opera continue in the bloodstream. And here we have another cell that comes in and is like the schoolyard police. And those cells are the macrophages. And the schoolyard police is trying to come and pick up those little bad kids and like regulate them. But the macrophages, the only thing they can do is they follow the oxidated molecules into the arteries, into those little pockets underneath the epithelial cells of the artery, and they start gobbling them up. They start putting them away, like in, you know, into this restricted space. But in that process, it turns into another cell. So the macrophage turns into what's called a foam cell, and it's a big fluffy cell full of little oxidated damaged molecules. And those cells are the plaque. So plaque is an accumulation of foam cells which are full of oxidated VLDLs which have been damaged by sugar. I hope I didn't make this story too long and complicated, and I hope the analogies help. But long story short, where we are getting at is that the real culprit here is not the lipoprotein or lipoprotein, it's sugar. And now we're going to come finally to look at good indicators for cardiovascular damage or cardiovascular risk or risk of heart attack. Where do we look? So if the VLDLs are the culprit, like where do we look? Can we just look at your blood lipid panel and look at the cholesterol number, or where do we look at the VLDLs? What if we don't have VLDLs and there is only LDLs? So ideally, what we will look at is the very small lipoproteins, and not just the VLDLs, but the VLDL-P, which is a very rare and expensive test that counts the number of very small, low density lipoproteins, and completely lost it here. It counts the number of those lipoproteins in your bloodstream, which can actually tell us what your risk is, because as many as are, oh yeah, I forgot the end of the story. Once they're damaged and they slip under the artery, they create plaque, but also once they are damaged, they cannot be taken up by the liver. They cannot be recycled. So they stay in circulation. So it's almost like the liver is, going home to mom and being safe inside the house. Instead, all these little tiny bullies are running amok in the streets, and they're never going home because mom doesn't recognize them and doesn't want them back. They've been so transformed. So here they are in the bloodstream, and that's where we would like ideally to see the count, not just of the total cholesterol or the total LDLs, but the ones that have been glycated and oxidated and damaged. Because of that test being so expensive and rare, there are other ways that we can actually look at your standard lipid panel and find some idea of what is going on. So we talked about triglycerides and the reason why triglycerides go up, which is fat storage due to high sugar. And here we already know the culprit is sugar. Insulin is like the accomplice, you know. Insulin acts when sugar comes on the scene. Insulin is not necessarily the bad guy because we need insulin, but too much insulin, we very well know that it causes a chain reaction in the body. So it has been found that actually dysregulated insulin, even not just high insulin, but dysregulated, so up and down blood sugar, roller coaster blood sugar, roller coaster insulin, it's what causes a lot of the issues with your lipids. So the high VLDL count, it is caused by dysregulation, by sugar and insulin bouncing up and down all the time. So here, if nothing else, is another amazing reason, really valid, solid reason why keto helps. And at the end of this long explanation, we will also go into keto and why it helps, except in some occasions where it might not help, but we'll see why. So we want to look at blood sugars. For me, that's one of the easy way to find out what's going on in your body. Just measure your blood sugar. You can do it at home. Get a blood sugar meter and monitor your blood sugar more than once a day, before and after meals. I do that with all my patients. We graph their blood sugars, and for like weeks at a time, sometimes we get all these graphs. That gives us a very good idea. I always do that. You know, I tell my patients, I prefer you having a little bit higher glucose but stable than lower glucose, which I call reactive, bouncing all over the place. So we want to look at triglycerides, and ideally triglycerides should be a half of total cholesterol for you to know that you are metabolizing your fats correctly. So that's a little tidbit of an indicator. Then we want to look at the HDLs. There is a direct correlation between HDLs and cardiovascular incidence. The more the HDL goes down, the higher the risk. And that's a direct proven, statistically and research proven correlation. So you want to keep an eye on triglyceride 1, HDL 2. And then you can look in the blood tests, you can find already the triglyceride HDL ratio. So there is parameters for the ratio to be a healthy ratio. But one they don't talk about, which is really, really important, is the ratio of LDL to cholesterol. So we want to have the LDLs 100 points lower than total cholesterol. And that is because why is your body making cholesterol? Remember, we talked about it at the beginning. The body makes cholesterol in response to a demand. And so what is the demand of the body? Usually it's inflammation. So just like those arteries start opening up and the particles slip in and start causing that plaque buildup, when the arteries start tearing, and those are called micro tears, that's where cholesterol comes to the scene, like the duct tape of the fat world, you remember? And just straps those holes closed, makes a nice thin layer over the tears, and so it fixes the problems in your body. So the more inflammation driven by sugar, as we know, and driven by sugar, but also part of the very high oxidations of the VLDL is driven by fatty rancid fats like omega-6, rancid omega-6. So think about trans fats, think about all this vegan craze of vegetable oils, that everything, has to be a vegetable oil. Canola oil, number one culprit, means high inflammation. And that becomes systemic inflammation in the body, which will raise certain markers. So the markers that tell us about inflammation are homocysteine, C-reactive protein. They're the two main ones. So those are also really good markers to look at when you want to look at predictors of cardiovascular disease. And this is good for you ladies. I know that my audience is mostly women, but it's also really good for your hubbies. So if the husband gets a blood test, you can go look for it. Sorry, I'm working.
Okay, we're taking off, so have a good day.
Thank you. See you tomorrow. Construction workers. Sorry, that was commercial break right there for a second. So I know this is a lot of information. It's pretty dense. Not everybody is into it because, it's a little bit dry and it's not super fun. But I think that it's part of your education if you know this stuff, at least if you hear it once, you have some sort of material to go back to your doctor and tell him, I do not need a statin. And by the way, if you guys are interested and if you are offered a statin, if your doctor just looks at your normal lipid panel and offers you a statin without discussing the numbers with you, without telling you, answering your questions or explaining why, just say no and ask for a second opinion. Find a better doctor, find somebody who understands. David Feldman has some really amazing research that is publishing lots of videos on YouTube. And also I'm going to link to him, and I'm going to link to Virta Health, Dr. Volek and Dr. Finney, my old friends from like 7 years ago when nobody else spoke about keto. They have a clinic, and in this clinic they take care of, especially targeted to diabetics and reverse diabetes too. So this was like one of my first inspirations for the work I began to do 7 years ago with the ketogenic diet. And of course, it goes into more and more and more because the benefits are almost never ending. All right. So are you guys bored out of your minds yet? Is anybody still there? Or did I put you out to sleep at 4 p.m. like time for a nap? Maybe can bore us to death. Anybody still watching? Please say hello so I know that I'm not just talking to this funky light that I have here and my phone. I think we covered everything. Oh yeah, last thing. Is anybody, somebody say hi. I didn't see you ladies. Oh, thank you, Lubna. So good to see you here again. Oh, you do have high cholesterol. So maybe now you have a little bit more information to dig into those numbers and see what's going on. And good. Rosie. Hi, Rosie. Oh, wow. Rosie was here. Yay. Awesome. Thank you for watching. Yes, she's still here. Fantastic. And by the way, ladies, I do read blood work, of course, and I prescribe blood work as well for my patients. So if any of you who follows me is ever in need to just do a simple consultation to read your number and get a holistic functional interpretation, you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to do that. I gotta admit, reading blood work is not the funnest thing for me, but it's kind of like part of that playing Sherlock Holmes, and playing detective and understanding what's going on in the body. The body is really fascinating, and it has so many mysteries. So part of that fascinating mysteries of the body, I want to conclude this video speaking about what David Feldman calls the lean mass hyperresponder. And I'm not sure that this really applies to the majority of my audience, because I know that the majority of my audience are women over 40 dealing with issues of weight and hormones. A lean mass hyperresponder is a person who has been doing keto for, is keto adapted pretty much as a very lean body mass and a high activity level. So you're skinny, built, buff, and and then you look at your lipid panel, and in this case, some people will have elevated numbers, so very high cholesterol and high LDLs. No good, right? You would think. So David Feldman does not quite, it has not come to, as in identified the type. So that typology that's come through the prolonged use of ketogenic diet has now been identified. So if any of you is lean and very lean muscle mass and high activity level on a ketogenic diet, and you find that your cholesterol and LDLs have skyrocketed, you might be one of those lean mass hyperresponder. It does not necessarily mean that you're unhealthy. A lot of other markers need to be addressed, not just your LDL and cholesterol. And based on the rest of your markers, an intelligent practitioner can then establish if you are at risk, any health risk, yes or no. So I would recommend that if you fit the profile, you might want to look deeper into that. That is, it's not really the main of my focus, but as part of the cholesterol and keto conversation, I thought it was really important to address, because some of you who have been doing keto and will have higher cholesterol, this could be one of the reasons. And it does not mean that you are unhealthy. So in a nutshell, if you are doing keto and you see that your cholesterol is getting higher, I would say do a complete blood work and have a functional practitioner look at all your numbers and put them together in a way that makes sense, not just pick out and isolate one number and then scream wolf because you see that the cholesterol went up 20 points, 50 points. Sometimes it goes up even 100 points, but does that mean that you are at risk for something? Great. Lubna, that might be your case. So this is something that you can look into. Again, ladies, I'm going to put some links under this video, and this would be a great time if you had any questions, because my tongue is almost dry. I think I bombarded you with a lot of pretty dense information, and thank you so much for sticking with me with this. My goal is always to help you, to educate you, to let you know what's possible, and especially from the perspective of a woman doing a ketogenic diet, and of a woman and a hormone specialist right here. I also want to tell you that not everything is the way that your doctor tells you, so please empower yourself with knowledge. You can stand up to your doctor, Cindy's here, hi. You don't want to end up on statins, which are very health damaging, powerful drugs that your liver will not like at all. No, neither would your bones, neither would your brain. You don't want to end up having to take those drugs just because your doctor decided that to save his ass, so his liability, or to makes more money, because every time your doctor writes you a prescription, he makes money, and that's the truth of it. I don't know why this is not scrolling up. Please don't take statins. Yes, Lubna, thank you for pitching in, because I think they're some of the most damaging prescriptions out there. And I think that, cholesterol and cardiovascular risk can be absolutely managed the natural way, with commitment and dedication and commitment to your diet and a healthy lifestyle. With your low carb, high fat diet, exactly, you can manage your cardiovascular health. You can manage cholesterol. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention this, for women over 40, it is actually much better to have a little bit higher cholesterol than having low cholesterol. There is a whole page here, and I don't know if you guys still have time for this, but I wanted to read you the risks of low cholesterol. I'm getting some questions. Where are you located? I am located in Mount Shasta, California, but I have an online practice and I see patients all over the world. Right now, I'm having clients in Japan, in Europe, in California, and I think almost every other state. I was on statins, had to back spasm and stop them. Good job, Rosie. High fives to you. Good job for stopping them. So I just wanted to very quickly read you the risks for low cholesterol. If I find it here, almost here. Okay, problems associated with reduced cholesterol. It weakens cellular membranes. That means it gives us wrinkles. Do you guys want wrinkles? We get them anyways. But not just that, all the cells of your organs, all the cells in your body. Weakens the quality of your myelin sheath, impairs memory and your ability to think. Thank you. It's bad enough without that, right? And poor steroid hormone production. So all of you who had a hormone test and your DHEA is like in the tank, in the pits, maybe it's because of your low cholesterol. And those of you on statins, if you are watching, it's a serious danger. Impairs immune system, immune function, and a serious drop can indicate pathology. So with this, I will leave you if there are no more questions. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching, Michaela and Cindy. Thank you so much for watching, ladies. This video will be available here on Facebook. So if you missed anything, you can watch it again. There are a lot of tips on blood work markers and what tests to get. And also you can find it on YouTube if you're not a Facebooker. As usual, I don't know the topic for next week. Surprise, you will get an email on Monday announcing the topic. So please sign up for my mailing list on the blog. Then you will get my newsletter with the replay links and everything. And thank you for being a follower. I really appreciate you. And I will see you next week here on Facebook. Have a wonderful week.